For understandable reasons, Sweden's accession to NATO has been dominating the European headlines recently. But in a way, this has obscured the fact that Sweden isn't in great shape at the moment, especially when it comes to the economy. IMF data from 2023 suggests that, apart from Estonia, Sweden was the worst performing economy in Europe last year, with GDP contracting by 0.7%. And late last month, Sweden's statistical authority announced that Sweden's GDP unexpectedly shrank in the last quarter of 2023, its third consecutive quarterly contraction. This all comes off the back of a slow-burning crisis in Sweden's housing market, which has helped push Swedish bankruptcies to the highest level in 3 decades. Sweden's lagging economy presents a real dilemma for its government, who are coming under increasing pressure to invest in its ailing welfare state, once the envy of the Western world, and a model for social democrats everywhere. While it's important not to overstate the severity of the crisis here, Sweden is still one of the wealthiest countries in the world after all. Sweden's welfare state clearly isn't what it once was, though. Its education system is in tatters, unemployment is on the rise, and a wave of gang violence is engulfing the country. So in this video, we'll take a look at how Sweden's celebrated welfare state has changed over time, the headwinds currently facing the Swedish economy, and what might happen next.
What will happen next?
Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop, and for years, Sweden seemed to have it all. After staying neutral throughout World War II, in the second part of the 20th century, Sweden's economy developed into a large knowledge-intensive and export-oriented manufacturing economy, with a generous welfare state, a world-renowned education system, low crime rates, and impressive levels of gender equality. However, like many other developed countries at the time, in the 1990s, Sweden moved towards a more market-oriented economy, as national finances came under strain and the Social Democrats' electoral dominance waned. Much of the Swedish welfare state, education system, and critical infrastructure was cut or privatised, with government spending falling from 70% of GDP down to less than 50%. In theory, these measures were supposed to improve efficiency and reduce government debt, which was then running at about 70% of GDP. To be fair to the Swedish government, it sort of worked, and Sweden's debt-to-GDP ratio is now down to about 40%, one of the lowest in Europe. Nonetheless, weaker public services do seem to have contributed to Sweden's economic and social issues. Let's start with Sweden's economy. As we mentioned in the intro, the Swedish economy is technically in recession at the moment, having contracted for 3 successive quarters. And even the Swedish government admits that the economic recovery won't begin until 2025. The proximate cause of Sweden's economic downturn is inflation, and its supposed remedy, interest rate hikes. In a bid to get inflation under control, which still remains above the central bank's target, Sweden's central bank carried out an 18-month campaign of rising interest rates. Back in 2020, the Riksbank policy rate held steady at 0%, but has since climbed to 4%. The theory goes that these higher interest rates increase the incentive to save, and make it more expensive, i.e. less attractive, to borrow. But this has really impacted Swedish households via the housing market. This is essentially because, unlike in countries like the UK, most Swedes have so-called floating mortgages rather than fixed-rate mortgages, which means
I know what it means.